Hare Krishna, everyone. Welcome back to the daily readings of Srila Prabhupada's books. We are all still absorbed in the pain of separation from Srila Bhakti Churu Swami Maharaj. His funeral ceremonies are going on today, and they're going to take his body to Mayapur, where he will be put in Samadhi next to Srila Prabhupada's Samadhi in the place where my godbrothers have their Samadhis, ones who have left this world. I reread my tribute to him that I read to you yesterday, and I made some edits, and in the spirit of continuing to remember him, I'm going to read it again. Some of you may not have heard it, so let me read it to you again. Dear devotees, may Srila Prabhupada shower his blessings on you, all glories to his divine grace. We've just lost one of ISKCON's most important leaders, His Holiness Bhakti Churu Swami, who succumbed to COVID-19 and the complications it brought on. He departed on the auspicious day of Guru Purnima, which is also the disappearance day of Srila Sanatana Goswami, a befitting day for one who relished sharing his realizations of Sri Brihad Bhagavatamrita even before the BBT published Gopi Puranadana Prabhu's translation. Such was his profound knowledge of Shastra. His Holiness Srila Bhakti Churu Swami was a symbol of encouragement to everyone and a perfect example of how to cooperate together in the mood of his eternal spiritual father and friend, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Maharaj spread Krishna consciousness on a level that is rare in the history of Vaishnavism. The innovative projects he spearheaded and completed are too numerous to count. But most importantly, he was genuinely affectionate to everyone he met. I first met him in 1977 during the Mayapur meetings and festival. I don't remember if it was his first meeting with Srila Prabhupada, but I've always remembered and relished the powerful first impression I received with the first long, warm embrace of many to come from this elevated soul. I watched Maharaj serve Srila Prabhupada with such tender affection later that year during the last month of Srila Prabhupada's transcendental pastimes. Maharaj was at once an intimate disciple. Everyone could see that, as Srila Prabhupada gave him first and second initiation at once, and shortly after sannyasa initiation. Shortly after sannyasa initiation in rapid order, perhaps the most rapid of all his disciples. Love and trust is everything in devotional relationships, and Maharaj's love for and trust in Srila Prabhupada emanated from his every word and deed, as indeed did Srila Prabhupada's trust in Maharaj. Bhakti Churu Maharaj's personal dealings were always eloquently refined, spiritually cultured reflections of the loving relationships displayed by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and his eternal associates we read about in Sri Caitanya-caritämrta. We who have borne the separation of Srila Prabhupada for almost 43 years, we who have borne the separation from Srila Prabhupada for almost 43 years pour out our love and affection to all of Maharaj's disciples in their grief, a grief which is not fully comprehensible to any of but those who have lost their eternal spiritual masters. I vow to help you in any way I can bear the grief you are now forced to bear. But we should all cling to the essential point Srila Bhakti Churu Maharaj repeatedly stressed, that Srila Prabhupada is the founder Acharya of ISKCON for as long as it exists. By keeping Srila Prabhupada in the center, especially by keeping his books in the center, constantly reading and distributing them to others, we will preserve Maharaj's instructions and legacy in the best possible way and help him help Srila Prabhupada keep his movement together. Let us all follow in Srila Bhakti Churu Swami's footsteps by staying in ISKCON, come what may, and honor the special undying loyalty Maharaj had for Srila Prabhupada's spiritual family, which is, as our spiritual master, His Divine Grace writes, our International Society for Krishna Consciousness is one of the branches of the Chaitanya tree. Hare Krishna. Keshava Bharati Das Goswami. So, we can reflect upon and remember Srila Bhakti Churu Maharaj's sweet, sublime, soft, gentle company by hearing the Caitanya-caritämrta together, because we see the emblems of those qualities in the eternal associates of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur glorified the Caitanya-caritämrta in a very special way, in a poetic way. He said, in due course, Mahapralaya, devastating floods, will inundate the entire universe. If you attempt to survive by swimming in that deluge, then do not neglect to take hold of Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, and Sri Caitanya-caritämrta. Or, if you cannot hold all three, then release Bhagavad Gita. If necessary, you may also relinquish Srimad Bhagavatam, but under no circumstances release your hold on Sri Caitanya-caritämrta. For if this one book remains, then the flood can do no actual damage, because after it has subsided, the message of Shastra can be revived from Sri Caitanya-caritämrta alone, it being the essence of all Shastra. Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityânanda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhaktavinda Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityânanda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhaktavinda Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityânanda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhaktavinda. So we've reached the 11th chapter of the Ädi-lilä, and we're starting at text 41 as the eternal associates of Sri Nityânanda Prabhu are being enumerated. Text 41. Udarana Datta Thakur, the 11th among the 12 cowherd boys, was an exalted devotee of Lord Nityânanda Prabhu. He worshipped the lotus feet of Lord Nityânanda in all respects. Purport. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur writes in his Anubhasha, the Gaura Ganodesha Dipika 129 states that Udaranadatta Thakur was formerly the cowherd boy of Vrindavan named Subahu. Udaranadatta Thakur, previously known as Sri Udaranadatta, was a resident of Saptagram, which is situated on the bank of the Saraswati River near the Trishabinga railway station in the district of Hooghly. At the time of Udarana Thakur, Saptagram was a very big town, encompassing many other places, such as Vasudevpur, Banshebedia, Krishnapur, Nityanandapur, Shivapur, Shankanagara, and Saptagram. Calcutta was developed under British rule by the influential mercantile community, and especially by the Suvarnavanik community, who came down from Saptagram to establish their businesses and homes all over Calcutta. They were known as the Saptagrami Mercantile Community of Calcutta, and most of them belonged to the Mulik and Sil families. More than half of Calcutta belonged to this community, as did Srila Udarana Thakur. Our paternal family also came from this district and belonged to the same community. The Muliks of Calcutta are divided into two families, namely the Sil family and Day family. All the Muliks of the Day family originally belonged to the same family Gotra. We also formerly belonged to the branch of the Day family, whose members, intimately connected with the Muslim rulers, received the title Mulik. In the Chaitanya Bhagavat, Anchakanda, chapter 5, it is said that Udaranadatta was an extremely elevated and liberal Vaishnava. He was born with the right to worship Nityananda Prabhu. It is also stated that Nityananda Prabhu, after staying for some time at Kadadaha, came to Saptagram and stayed in the house of Udaranadatta. The Suvarnavanik community to which Udaranadatta belonged was actually a Vaishnava community. Its members were bankers and gold merchants. Suvarna means gold and Vanik means merchant. Long ago there was a misunderstanding between Balal Sain and the Suvarnavanik community because of the great banker Gauri Sain. Balal Sain was taking loans from Gauri Sain and spending money extravagantly, and therefore Gauri Sain stopped supplying money. Balal Sain took revenge by instigating a social conspiracy to make the Suvarnavaniks outcasts, and since then they have been ostracized from the higher castes, namely the Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, and Vaishyas. But by the grace of Srila Nityananda Prabhu, the Suvarnavanik community was again elevated. It is said in the Chaitanya Bhagavat, Yateka vanikula udarana hoite pavitra haila dvida nahika ihate. Chaitanya Bhagavat, Antyakanda 5, 453. There is no doubt that all the community members of the Suvarnavanik society were again purified by Sri Nityananda Prabhu. In Saptagram there is still a temple with a sixth armed deity of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that was personally worshipped by Srila Udaranadatta Thakur. On the right side of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is a deity of Sri Nityananda Prabhu, and on the left side is Gadadhar Prabhu. There are also a Radha Govinda Murti and a Shalagram Shila. And below the throne is a picture of Sri Udaranadatta Thakur. In front of the temple there is now a big hall, and in front of the hall is a Madhavi Lata plant. The temple is in a very shady, cool, and nicely situated location. When we returned from America in 1967, the executive committee members of this temple, when we returned from America in 1967, the executive committee members of this temple invited us to visit it. And thus we had the opportunity to visit this temple with some American students. Formerly, in our childhood, we visited this temple with our parents because all the members of the Suvarnavanic community enthusiastically take interest in this temple of Udaranadatta Thakur. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur adds in his Anubhashya, in the Bengali year 1283, AD 1876, a Babaji of the name Nitai Das arranged for a donation of 12 bighas of land, about 4 acres, for the temple where Udarana Thakur worshipped. The management of the temple later deteriorated, but then in 1306, AD 1899, through the cooperation of the famous Balaram Mulik of Hooghly, who was a sub-judge, and many rich Suvarnavanic community members, the management of the temple improved greatly. Not more than 50 years ago, one of the family members of Udarana Das Thakur, named Jagamohan Datta, established a wooden murti, statue of Udarana Datta Thakur in the temple, but that murti is no longer there. At present, a picture of Udarana Datta Thakur is worshipped. It is understood, however, that the wooden murti of Udarana Thakur was taken away by Sri Madan Mohan Datta and is now being worshipped with a Shalagram Shila by Srinath Datta. Udarana Datta Thakur was the manager of the estate of a big zamindar in Naihati, about 1.5 miles north of Katwa. The relics of this royal family are still visible near the Dainhata station. Since Udarana Datta Thakur was the manager of the estate, it was also known as Udaranapur. Udarana Datta Thakur installed Nitai Gaur deities that were later brought to the house of the zamindar, which was known as Vanayao Yaribada. Vanao Yaribada. Sri Udarana Datta Thakur remained a householder throughout his life. His father's name was Srikar Dutt, his mother's name was Bhadrabati, and his son's name was Srinivas Datta. Text 42. Such intimate details. The 27th prominent devotee of Nityananda Prabhu was Acharya Vaishnavananda, a great personality in devotional service. He was formerly known as Raghunath Puri. Purport. In the Gora Ganudesh Deepika 97, it is said that Raghunath Puri was previously very powerful in the 8 mystic successes. He was an incarnation of one of the successes. Text 43. Another important devotee of Lord Nityananda Prabhu was Vishnu Das, who had 2 brothers, Nandana and Ganga Das. Lord Nityananda Prabhu sometimes stayed at their house. Purport. The 3 brothers, Vishnu Das, Nandana, and Ganga Das, were residents of Navadvip and belonged to the Bhattacharya Brahmana family. Both Vishnu Das and Ganga Das stayed for some time with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu at Jagannath Puri, and the Chaitanya Bhagavat states that formerly Nityananda Prabhu stayed at their house. Text 44. Paramananda Upadhyaya was Nityananda's great servitor. Sri Jiva Pandit glorified the qualities of Sri Nityananda Prabhu. Purport. Sri Paramananda Upadhyaya was an advanced devotee. His name is mentioned in the Chaitanya Bhagavat, where Sri Jiva Pandit is also mentioned as the second son of Ratnagarbha Acharya and a childhood friend of Hadai Oja, the father of Nityananda Prabhu. In Gauraganodesha Deepika 169, it is said that Sri Jiva Pandit was formerly the gopi named Indira. Text 45. The 31st devotee of Lord Nityananda Prabhu was Paramananda Gupta, who was greatly devoted to Lord Krishna and highly advanced in spiritual consciousness. Formerly, Nityananda Prabhu also resided in his house for some time. Purport. Paramananda Gupta composed a prayer to Lord Krishna known as Krishna Stavavali. In the Gauraganodesha Deepika 194 and 199, it is stated that he was formerly the gopi named Manjumeda. Text 46. The 32nd, 33rd, 34th, and 35th prominent devotees were Narayana, Krishnadas, Manohara, and Devananda, who were always engaged in the service of Lord Nityananda. Text 47. The 36th devotee of Lord Nityananda was Hoda Krishnadas, whose life and soul was Nityananda Prabhu. He was always dedicated to the lotus feet of Nityananda, and he knew no one else but him. Purport. The residence of Krishnadas Hoda was Badagachi, which is now in Bangladesh. Text 48. Among Lord Nityananda's devotees, Nakadi was the 37th, Mukunda the 38th, Surya the 39th, Madhava the 40th, Sridhar the 41st, Ramananda the 42nd, Jagannath the 43rd, and Mahidara the 44th. Purport. Sridhar was the 12th Gopal. Text 49. Srimanta was the 45th, Gokuladas the 46th, Hariharananda the 47th, Shivai the 48th, Nandai the 49th, and Paramananda the 50th. Text 50. Vasanta was the 51st, Navani Hoda the 52nd, Gopal the 53rd, Sanatana the 54th, Vishnai the 55th, Krishnananda the 56th, and Sulochan the 57th. Purport. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur writes in his Anubhashya, Navani Hoda appears to have been the same person as Hoda Krishnadas, the son of the king of Badagachji. His father's name was Hari Hoda. One can visit Badagachji by taking the Lalagola Ghat. By taking the Lalagola Ghat railway station, Hare Krishna. I'll start that sentence again. One can visit Badagachji by taking the Lalagola Ghat railway line. Formerly the Ganges flowed by the Gadagachji, but now it has become a canal known as Kalshirakala. Near the Mudagachta station is a village known as Shaligram, in which King Krishnadas arranged for the marriage of Sri Nityananda Prabhu, as described in the Bhakti Ratnakara, 12th wave. It is sometimes said that Navani Hoda was the son of Raja Krishnadas. His descendants still live in Rukunapur, a village named Bahirgachji. They belong to the Dakshina Radhiya Kayastha community, but having been reformed as Brahmanas, they still initiate all classes of men. Excuse me for 1 second. Text 51. The 58th great devotee of Lord Nityananda Prabhu was Kangsari Sen. The 59th was Rama Sen. The 60th was Ramachandra Kaviraj. And the 61st, 62nd, and 63rd were Govinda, Sriranga, and Mukunda, who were all physicians. Purport. Sri Ramachandra Kaviraj, the son of Kandavasi Chiranjeev and Sunanda, was a disciple of Srinivasa Acharya and the most intimate friend of Narottam Das Thakur, who prayed several times for his association. His youngest brother was Govinda Kaviraj. Srila Jiva Goswami very much appreciated Sri Ramachandra Kaviraj's great devotion to Lord Krishna and therefore gave him the title Kaviraj. Sri Ramachandra Kaviraj, who was perpetually disinterested in family life, greatly assisted in the preaching work of Srinivas Acharya and Narottam Das Thakur. He resided at first in Sri Khanda, but later in the village of Kumaranagara on the bank of the Ganges. Govinda Kaviraj was the brother of Ramachandra Kaviraj, and youngest son of Chiranjeev of Sri Khanda. Although at first a Shakta, or worshipper of goddess Durga, he was later initiated by Srinivasa Acharya Prabhu. Govinda Kaviraj also resided first in Sri Khanda and then in Kumaranagara, but later he moved to the village known as Telia Budari on the southern bank of the river Padma. Since Govinda Kaviraj, the author of two books, Sangita Madhava and Gitamrita, was a great Vaishnava Kavi or poet, Srila Jiva Goswami gave him the title Kaviraj. He is described in the Bhakti Ratnakara, 9th wave. Kangsari Sen was formerly Ratnavali in Braj, as described in the Gaura Ganodesha Dipika 194 and 200. Text 52. Among the devotees of Lord Nityänanda Prabhu, Pitambar was the 64th, Madhvacharya the 65th, Damodar Das the 66th, Shankar the 67th, Mukunda the 68th, Gyanadas the 69th, and Manohara the 70th. Text 53. The dancer Gopal was the 71st, Ramabhadra the 72nd, Gauranga Das the 73rd, Nishinga Chaitanya the 74th, and Minakatain Ramadas the 75th. Purport. The Gaura Ganodesha Dipika 68 describes Minikatan Ramdas as an incarnation of Sankarshan. Oh, that's big. He was the one that Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami's brother offended. Remember? Text 54. Vrindavan Das Thakur, the son of Srimati Narayani, composed Sri Chaitanya Mangal, later known as Sri Chaitanya Bhagavat. Text 55. Srila Vyasadeva described the pastimes of Krishna in Srimad Bhagavatam. The Vyas of the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was Vrindavan Das. Purport. Srila Vrindavan Das Thakur was an incarnation of Veda Vyas and also a friendly cowherd boy named Kusamapida in Krishna Lila. Kusamapida. In other words, the author of Sri Chaitanya Bhagavat, Srila Vrindavan Das Thakur, the son of Srivas Thakur's niece Narayani, was a combined incarnation of Veda Vyas and the cowherd boy Kusamapida. Kusamapida. There is a descriptive statement by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur in his commentary on Sri Chaitanya Bhagavat, giving the biographical details of the life of Vrindavan Das Thakur. Text 56. Among all the branches of Sri Nityananda Prabhu, Virabhadra Gosai was the topmost. His sub-branches were unlimited. 57. No one can count the unlimited followers of Nityananda Prabhu. I have mentioned some of them just for my purification. Text 58. All these branches, the devotees of Lord Nityananda Prabhu, being full of ripened fruits of love of Krishna, distributed these fruits to all they met, flooding them with love of Krishna. Text 59. All these devotees had unlimited strength to deliver unobstructed, unceasing love of Krishna. By their own strength, they could offer anyone Krishna and love of Krishna. Purport. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur has sung Krishna se tomara, Krishna dite para, tomara shakati ache. In this song, Bhaktivinoda Thakur describes that a pure Vaishnava, as the proprietor of Krishna and love of Krishna, can deliver both to anyone and everyone he likes. Therefore, to get Krishna and love of Krishna, one must seek the mercy of pure devotees. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur also says, Yasya prasadad bhagavat prasado, yasya prasadan nagati katopi. By the mercy of the spiritual master, one is blessed by the mercy of Krishna. Without the grace of the spiritual master, one cannot make any advancement. By the grace of a Vaishnava, or bona fide spiritual master, one can get both love of Godhead, Krishna, and Krishna himself. Text 60. I have briefly described only some of the followers and devotees of Lord Nityananda Prabhu. Even the thousand-mouthed Sheshanaga cannot describe all of these unlimited devotees. Shri Rupa Raghunatha Padi Yada Ash Caitanya-caritämrta Kahi Krishna Das. With an ardent desire to serve the purpose of Shri Rupa and Shri Raghunath, I, Krishna Das, narrate Shri Caitanya-caritämrta following in their footsteps. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports to Shri Caitanya-caritämrta, Ädi-lilä, 11th chapter, in the matter of the expansions of Lord Nityänanda Prabhu. Jai Nityananda Prabhu ki jai, Shri Veer Baba Goswami ki jai, all the devotees of Lord Nityananda Prabhu ki jai. Lord Premanande, Hari Hari Bo. We're gone through another act of the drama, of the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. We're learning about all these personalities and who they were, what their relationships were, and later on we'll hear them as the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya unfold. Very interesting. The names of all these personalities are so purifying. It may seem like, oh, you're just reading off a list of names, but each one of the names are non-different than them. The sound of their names are non-different from them. Just as the sound of Krishna's name is non-different from him, so the sound of the eternal associates of Lord Chaitanya and Krishna are non-different from them. I always thought it was interesting how Uddharanadatta Thakur's deity was stolen and put somewhere else and worshipped with another deity, or with another something, I don't know. Yeah, it was another deity. And there was a picture put there instead. They worshipped the picture. So I was remembering our altar because we don't have the facilities here to have deities, but the altar made of photographs of all these personalities, a couple of paintings, one painting. They're so potent. Abai, Das Brahmachari, worships them every day, cleans the altar very thoroughly, and cleans every single photo and every single item, table and everything. And I know he's feeling some nectar when he does that. because the pictures are not different than the person. Okay, let's move on. We'll at least get through the summary of chapter 12 and see how far we can get. Chapter 12, the expansions of Advaita Acharya and Gadadhar Pandit. Bhaktivinoda Thakur gives a summary of the 12th chapter in his Amrita Pravaha Bhashya. The 12th chapter describes the followers of Advaita Prabhu, among whom the followers of Nityänanda, the son of Advaita Acharya, are understood to be the purer followers who received the cream of the philosophy Sri Advaita Acharya enunciated. Other so-called descendants and followers of Advaita Acharya are not to be recognized. This chapter also includes narrations concerning the son of Advaita Acharya named Gopal Mishra and Advaita Acharya's servant named Kamalakanta Bishwas. In his early life, Gopal fainted during the cleansing of the Gundicha Mandir at Jagannath Puri and thus became a recipient of the mercy of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. The story of Kamalakanta Vishwas concerns his borrowing 300 rupees from Prataparudra Maharaj to clear a debt of Advaita Acharyas, for which Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu chastised him when he came to know of it. Kamalakanta Vishwas was then purified by the request of Sri Advaita Acharya. After describing the descendants of Advaita Acharya, the chapter concludes by describing the followers of Gadadhar Pandit Goswami. Text 1. The followers of Sri Advaita Prabhu were of two kinds. Some were real followers and the others were false. Rejecting the false followers, I offer my respectful obeisances to Sri Advaita Acharya's real followers, whose life and soul was Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Jai Jai Mahaprabhu Sri Krishna Chaitanya, Jai Jai Nityänanda, Jai Advaita Dhanya. All glories to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. All glories to Lord Nityänanda. All glories to Sri Advaita Prabhu. All of them are glorious. Text 3. I offer my respectful obeisances to the all glorious Advaita Prabhu, who forms the second branch of the eternal Chaitanya tree, and to his followers, who form his sub-branches. Text 4. Sri Advaita Prabhu was the second big branch of the tree. There are many sub-branches, but it is impossible to mention them all. Text 5. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was also the gardener, and as he poured the water of his mercy on the tree, all the branches and sub-branches grew day after day. Text 6. The fruits of love of Godhead that grew on those branches of the Chaitanya tree were so large that they flooded the entire world with love of Krishna. Text 7. As the trunk and branches were watered, the branches and sub-branches spread lavishly, and the tree grew full with fruits and flowers. At first, all the followers of Advaita Acharya shared a single opinion, but later they followed two different opinions as ordained by providence. Purport. The words Daivera Karana indicate that by dint of providence, or by God's will, the followers of Advaita Acharya divided into two parties. Such disagreement among the disciples of one Acharya is also found among the members of the Gaudiya Math. In the beginning, during the presence of Om Vishnupad, Paramahamsa, Paribrajaka-acharya, Ashtotarashara, Sri Srimad Bhaktisiddhanta, Saraswati Thakur, Prabhupada, all the disciples worked in agreement. But just after his appearance, they disagreed. One party strictly followed the instructions of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, but another group created their own concoction about executing his desires. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, at the time of his departure, requested all his disciples to form a governing body and conduct missionary activities cooperatively. He did not instruct a particular man to become the next Acharya. But just after his passing away, his leading secretaries made plans, without authority, to occupy the post of Acharya, and they split into two factions over who the next Acharya would be. Consequently, both factions were asara, or useless, because they had no authority, having disobeyed the order of the spiritual master. Despite the spiritual master's order to form a governing body and execute the missionary activities of the Gaudiya Math, the two unauthorized factions began litigation that is still going on after 40 years with no decision. Therefore, we do not belong to any faction, but because the two parties busy dividing the material assets of the Gaudiya Math institution stopped the preaching work, we took up the mission of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and Bhaktivinoda Thakur to preach the cult of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu all over the world under the protection of all the predecessor acharyas. And we find that our humble attempt has been successful. We followed the principles especially explained by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in his commentary on the Bhagavad Gita verse, beginning Vyavasayatmika Buddhir Ekeha Gurunandana. That's 241, Bhagavad Gita. According to this instruction of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, it is the duty of a disciple to follow strictly the orders of his spiritual master. The secret of success and advancement in spiritual life is the firm faith of the disciple in the orders of his spiritual master. The Vedas confirm this. Yasya Devi Para Bhaktir Yata Devi Tata Garao Tasyaite Katita Yarta Prakashante Mahatmanaha. To one who has staunch faith in the words of the spiritual master and the words of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the secret of success in Vedic knowledge is revealed. The Krishna consciousness movement is being propagated according to this principle, and therefore our preaching work is going on successfully in spite of the many impediments offered by antagonistic demons, because we are getting positive help from our previous acharyas. One must judge every action by its result. The members of the self-appointed acharya's party who occupied the property of the Gaudiya Math are satisfied, but they could make no progress in preaching. Therefore, by the result of their actions, one should know that they are asara, or useless. Whereas the success of the ISKCON party, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, which strictly follows Guru and Gauranga, is increasing daily all over the world. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur wanted to print as many books as possible. Shall I repeat that? You wouldn't mind? Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur wanted to print as many books as possible and distribute them all over the world. We have tried our best in this connection, and we are getting results beyond our expectations. Srila Prabhupada's Ki Jai. Srila Prabhupada's books Ki Jai. I beg the mercy of all of our acharyas and all of the devotees listening, and even the devotees who are not listening, that we get the same mercy as we publish the audiobooks of the major works of Srila Prabhupada including the Caitanya-caritämrta, which is already mostly recorded. It's now being edited by Rasika Shiromani, very nicely, by the way. Everyone I've played a sample to have been very enthusiastic about it. Even the publisher, Brahma Muhurta, Devamrita Maharaj, the connoisseur of Briya Bhagavatamrita and Caitanya-caritämrta, Shiva Maharaj, Vaisheshika Prabhu, and many, many others. So it could be another wave of Prabhupada's publications. Every time I hear this statement by Prabhupada in his books, which is there a lot, I get overwhelmed, I guess you could say, by a little ecstasy, because I know what I'm doing. I'm publishing his books in a way that have not been published before, in an authorized line. Hare Krishna. Text 9. Some of the disciples strictly accepted the orders of the Acharya, and others deviated, independently concocting their own opinions under the spell of Daivi Maya. Purport. This verse describes the beginning of a schism. When disciples do not stick to the principle of accepting the order of their spiritual master, immediately there are two opinions. Any opinion different from the opinion of the spiritual master is useless. One cannot infiltrate materially concocted ideas into spiritual advancement. That is deviation. There is no scope for adjusting spiritual advancement to material ideas. I hope everyone's listening very attentively, because this is big stuff. Text 10. The order of the spiritual master is the active principle in spiritual life. Anyone who disobeys the order of the spiritual master immediately becomes useless. Purport. Here's the opinion of Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. Persons who strictly follow the orders of the spiritual master are useful in executing the will of the Supreme, whereas persons who deviate from the strict order of the spiritual master are useless. Text 11. There is no need to name those who are useless. I have mentioned them only to distinguish them from the useful devotees. Text 12. Paddy is mixed with straw at first, and one must fan it to separate the paddy from the straw. Purport. This example given by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami is very appropriate. In the case of the Gaudiya Mat members, one can apply a similar process. There are many disciples of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, but to judge who is actually his disciple, to divide the useful from the useless, one must measure the activities of such disciples in executing the will of the spiritual master. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur tried his best to spread the cult of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to countless countries outside India. When he was present, he patronized the disciples to go outside India to preach the cult of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But they were unsuccessful because within their minds they were not actually serious about preaching his cult in foreign countries. They simply wanted to take credit for having gone to foreign lands and utilize this recognition in India by advertising themselves as repatriated preachers. Many swamis have adopted this hypocritical means of preaching for the last 80 years or more, but no one could preach the real cult of Krishna consciousness all over the world. They merely came back to India, falsely advertising that they had converted all the foreigners to the ideas of Vedanta or Krishna consciousness, and then they collected funds in India and lived satisfied lives of material comfort. As one fans paddy to separate the real paddy from useless straw by accepting the criterion recommended by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, one can very easily understand who is a genuine world preacher and who is useless. Hare Krishna. So we can understand that His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj was a bona fide disciple of Srila Prabhupada by the fruits of his service, the number of wonderful projects that sprung from his will and his dedication to Srila Prabhupada's teachings. Okay, we'll stop there. That's almost an hour. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Shri Advaita Acharya Prabhu ki jai. Gaur Premanandi. Hari Hari Bo. Okay, what do you got over there?
First is a comment from Krishna Katha Prabhu.
Hey, Krishna Katha.
He says, Hare Krishna Gurudev, please accept my humble obeisances. Thank you for reading your offering to Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj again. Just beautiful. Even better with the edits, of course.
Well, thanks. As a matter of fact, Krishna Katha, I'm anyway. I'll get in touch with you soon. We haven't exchanged any correspondence in quite some time. So get in touch with me, please. Thank you.
Up next is Rati Manjari.
Hey Rati, Hare Krishna.
Says, Dear Guru Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. Thank you for another blissful reading, bringing into our lives the blessed association of Lord Chaitanya's associates.
The pleasure is all mine, Rati. Always is and always will be.
Says, I have a question. We are hearing a lot about the location details of the different temples and birthplaces of the associates of Lord Chaitanya from Srila Prabhupada's Bhaktivedanta purports. Are we to understand that Srila Prabhupada himself traveled to all or most of these holy places?
No, he translated the descriptions from Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's commentaries. But he did go to many of the places, and he mentions, in just what we read, he mentioned a couple of places that he had gone to. Remember when he came back from America with some Western disciples, and he got an invitation to the temple of, was it Uddara Datta Thakur? No. Can't remember which one it was. But anyway, he explains where he visited and the places he visited. But it's interesting, I think, that all these places are like in a certain area, they were just packed with, all-powerful personalities, and what it must have been like to have been there at that time, what the kirtans must have been like. We cannot even imagine. Srila Prabhupada was a little different. He moved in a different way, and he wasn't one of the founding, devotees of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's movement. He kept himself a little aloof, but when he joined and when he got initiated, he was full on. But he wasn't one of the sannyasis in the inner circle, because in India it tends to be like that. And one time Prabhupada explained to us that he once walked in, and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was there sitting in a kind of like a couch, and the devotee was sitting on the floor, and Prabhupada walked right in and sat right on the couch with Bhaktisiddhanta, and they started talking like they were old friends. And the devotees were completely bewildered; they couldn't understand. But Prabhupada was it was obviously, there was some relationship there that was different than the others, obviously. And Prabhupada was aware of it, but he didn't jump down, and get on the floor with everybody else. But he just sat there the whole time, and But he never did it again. It was the first and last time he sat on the same level with Bhakti. It was symbolic. And sometimes the sannyasis, especially when Prabhupada, he was a little successful at his business at the beginning, and then Krishna took it away from him so he could go to the West and fulfill the order of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. But at one point he was in Bombay and he was successful, and he was giving donations and he was helping to organize the Gaudiya Math there in Bombay. And the devotees would come to, the sannyasis would come to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. Oh, you should bring in, they called him Abai Babu. You should bring him in, he's so good. He preaches so nice in English, and he knows how to organize, and he's got money in his pocket, and all these things. And Bhaktisiddhanta said, no, you leave him. In time he will do everything. That's what he said. And one time Prabhupada went to visit Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur when he was doing his Braj Mandala Parikrama. And he greeted him. He went to, maybe there were one or two times, but one of the times he went to Radhakund. And there he walked around Radhakund with Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And at one point, the Thakur gave him an instruction. He said, if you ever get money, print books. And he said, there's a fire in the mat. So you keep yourself away from the fire. If you ever get money, print books. So this Vyabasyapmika Buddhireki Hakunandana, the commentary on that verse by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, that the order of the spiritual master is the life and soul of the disciple. And Srila Prabhupada exemplified that to the nth degree, because he didn't see Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur that many times, only a handful of times, a couple of handful of times. But he did more than all of his other God brothers put together to execute the order of Lord Chaitanya and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and spread genuine Krishna consciousness all over the world in such a wonderful way. And all you have to do is walk down the road, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur road, parallel the Ganga, and you see all of the mats, the Chaitanya mat and this mat and that mat, and you come to ISKCONs, and it's like a bustling metropolis compared to the others. And that is the fruits by which Srila Prabhupada is asking us to judge who is actually useful, who is actually a bona fide disciple of the spiritual master. Because they follow the orders of the spiritual master and they get things done. When Prabhupada left, there was only 108 exactly temples and projects. Now there's more than 800. So one may say, yes, but we could do so more, we should have done more. Anyway, it's still growing. It's still growing. The books are still going out. During this pandemic, they're going out faster than ever in some places. So those books are planting seeds. Even if people touch these books. Now hopefully when we get these audiobooks out and they start circulating and people start hearing the books, it's harder for people to read now, but when they hear, hopefully by the grace of Srila Prabhupada, the narrations will be attractive enough that devotees and non-devotees will be able to hear and relish the transcendental sound, and their hearts will change. Hare Krishna.
Next is something from Daityari Haridas.
Daitya Hari Hari.
Says, Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you for another amazing reading. Hearing you speak about Bhakti Churu Swami and seeing the genuine love and affection real Vaishnavas have for one another is inspiring to see, but also makes me feel incredibly shallow. How do we become attached to advanced devotees, and all devotees for that matter, and get their mercy so that we can also become real Vaishnavas by their association?
By associating. You said you answered your own question, and you answered your own question in your question. By associating with them. But not by associating with them just in any way, but by associating with them in a service attitude, with love and affection. I mean, Bhakti Churu Maharaj was famous all over our movement. Whenever he came to a new place, he would always embrace with deep, long affection embraces the leaders of the yatra, and appreciate them. We become attached to those who are empowered by appreciating them, by glorifying them, just like we become attached to the books by glorifying the books. We become attached to the process of devotional service by glorifying those processes to others. This is what Anandam Buddhivardhanam. Anandam Buddhivardhanam means that the ocean of devotional service is Anandam Buddhivardhanam. It's always expanding. So the more you give, the more it expands in your own heart, and the more it grows externally and internally. So this is the way to get attached. You just try, according to your capacity. Don't try to imitate these great souls who can touch somebody with a whip and they become a pure devotee, or frolicking with tigers and other wild animals like their playthings. Don't try to imitate, but just follow in their footsteps and become attached to chanting Hare Krishna. Become attached to hearing about Krishna, Lord Chaitanya, and all their associates, and glorifying them. Just like when we have Vyasa Puja, ceremonies for our God brothers, or especially for Srila Prabhupada, when the devotees get together and hear each other's glorifications, it's the sweetest time, actually. It's sweetest time. At least that's my experience. When devotees get together and glorify one another and glorify the Lord, the atmosphere becomes surcharged with spiritual bliss. And that spiritual bliss awakens within the heart that same spiritual bliss. So seek out the kirtan, seek out the service, seek out the devotees who are, actively preaching and spreading Krishna consciousness, because that is the movement of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Don't just get, hunkered down in a comfortable situation, and don't preach, don't go out. Nowadays you can't go out so much because of the pandemic, but through this social media, through the telephone and the cell phones and the mobile phones and the computers and all of the internet connections that are there, the network. Get on there. All people that you meet, give Krishna consciousness to others. And associate with those who are expert at giving Krishna consciousness to others. And you will get that taste. Hare Krishna.
Next is from Vrindavaneshwari Devi Dasi.
Well, Vrindavaneshwari and Krishna Katha are there together. Fancy that.
She says, the verse resonates with me today. Quote, by the mercy of the spiritual master, one is blessed by the mercy of Krishna. Without the grace of the spiritual master, one cannot make any advancement. Unquote. It fills me with gratitude for the selfless, loving service of His Holiness Bhakti Churu Swamis and all of his god brothers, including yourself, to spread this much-needed Krishna consciousness.
Well, thank you very much. Welcome aboard. The water's fine. Just jump on in.
Something from Sarva Prabhu.
Mm-hmm. Haribol Sarva.
He says, we read today how the disciples of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur had trouble obeying his orders to cooperate in his mission. His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami is especially glorious for his tireless efforts to promote cooperation and loyalty to Srila Prabhupada as the founder Acharya of ISKCON. Also Vaishnava etiquette.
Well said. Sarva, well said. Perfect. And he was always speaking about it. He was always speaking about how Srila Prabhupada is the founder Acharya and the reasons why he, every devotee should read this book, Srila Prabhupada, the founder Acharya of ISKCON. And there's a nice introduction by Bhakti True Maharaj in the front of that book, in the front matter of that book. I would say it's a very interesting, historically it's interesting, spiritually, socially it's interesting, and it explains so many things. It's so well documented, so well written, and it explains how it is that Prabhupada tried to engage his godbrothers and the Gaudiya Math. When he went to America, he didn't have anything. He had nothing. The only connection he had was from his spiritual master and his spiritual master's movement. He tried, he went on letter campaign after letter campaign after letter campaign to try to get them to join him. And then he started to get success, and he started to tell them about the success. And he even said at one point, you can read this about this in this little GBC publication, Srila Prabhupada, the founder Acharya of ISKCON, with an introduction or some foreword by Bhakti True Maharaj or some part of the, I can't remember exactly, but some part of the front matter. And he even went so far as to tell them, this is your movement, you be the help, and I will work underneath you. And they couldn't do it. They wouldn't do it. They couldn't do it, and they wouldn't do it. And that was before, his disciples started calling him Prabhupada. But they could see that he was doing something that they couldn't do. And that is the nature of material existence. So to get out of that material existence, to break free from envy of other personalities and be able to openly solicit their help and glorify them, which is what Prabhupada did. And when he had no alternative, when there's no chance that they were going to, that's when he started ISKCON. And that's when he established himself as the founder Acharya. And he insisted. No one else had used that title. No one, what to speak of. Well, Bhaktisiddhanta used it in regards to the four acharyas who kept the four sampradayas intact in the Kali Yuga: Ramanujacharya, Madhvacharya, Vishnu Swami, and Nimbarka. He called them the founder acharyas. But never did he use the founder acharya about himself. I think there was one incident in one magazine written by one of his disciples where he used that term in regard to Bhaktisiddhanta, but that's all. In the general daily, day-to-day, it was nothing. But Prabhupada, he insisted that name, founder acharya, be there wherever the International Society for Krishna Consciousness was in print. And this way he just took the order of the spiritual master and just fixed it in his movement. And I recall being with Bhakti True Maharaj many times where he would, in his lectures, he would preach this point, And like you said, Sarva, he was an exemplar of how to be loyal to Prabhupada's society and the movement that he started. So many have gone out to the Gaudiya Math, and even they become critical of ISKCON for so many reasons, thinking that they know better, or now they're in a higher realm or something, whatever it is. So many varieties of the deviation. But if you look carefully, if you go to their places and see what they're doing, you won't find that vibrant atmosphere. They're all, trying to get their personal relationship with Krishna, and they're becoming bhajananandis, and it's a different atmosphere. It may be, Lord Chaitanya's line, and many times we read in Caitanya-caritämrta, Prabhupada states in his purports, there are two kinds of bona fide devotees, bhajananandis and goshjanandis. And the bhajananandis are ones that are mostly concerned with their own spiritual advancement, the awakening of their own relationship with Krishna, and the developing of that own relationship with Krishna, but are not so much interested in reaching out to others and bringing them in to Lord Chaitanya's family tree. So if we keep doing this, even if we're not as efficient as Lord Chaitanya or Nityänanda or Advaita Acharya or these, Vishnu Tattva devotees, but Kali Yuga is so pernicious, and the tendency to find fault and argue and not cooperate and, make hesitation so the movement can't grow nicely, not to, Prabhupada, as Lord Chaitanya said, he spread the water, he kept sprinkling the water on these different parts, and as that sprinkling of that mercy, the plant, the branches, and grew fruits and flowers and became fragrant and juicy and tasty. That's what we have to do. Make our own society fruitful and juicy and tasty. Make our own association like that. That's the measure of how we're following the orders of the spiritual master, how we've made the order of the spiritual master our life and soul, not to concoct different ways of doing things and different things. Thank you, Sarva. That was a very nice comment. Thank you.
Rati says, thank you for illuminating that point about the travels.
Yeah.
And Shantarupa Devi Dasi says, the more you give, the more you grow. Thank you.
Yes. That's the secret. That's the secret. Okay, we'll stop here. Hare Krishna, thank you so much. Srila Bhakti Churu Swami Maharaj Ki Jai. Srila Bhakti Churu Swami Maharaj Mahatirtha Atirobhav Mahotsava Ki Jai. Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bo. Sri Caitanya-caritämrta Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bo. See you tomorrow. Guess when? Same time, same place, same station. Haribo. Hare Krishna.